Well, hello there. How is everyone? You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. It's Wednesday. That's it, baby. It's Wednesday, the midweek hump. The midweek hump, and we all love the midweek hump. Anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes. As what we're talking about in this video is Thompson, Bethany Funke, Bryan Kohberger, the state's case. Where was Bryan Kohberger at the time of the crime? Some little bits and pieces that I think are pertinent to the situation that we find ourselves in, which is heading towards a trial where the state are doing one thing, the defence are saying another. You've got Bryan Kohberger in the middle, and then you've got us, the general public, who have been privy to certain things, not privy to other things, and we have drawn conclusions subsequently from what we have been subjected to and not subjected to. Let's talk about it. This here. So what we've got here is some notes. As you know, myself and the man Eddie, we collaborate a bit in the background. We talk about things. We talk about the Idaho 4 case a lot. So I'm going to go through these notes with you, and I want you to put some comments at the end of this video. Not now, at the end, with what you think. As we're sort of galloping towards this trial in August. So it says Thompson and the state have and are past the third or fourth court-ordered deadline for production of discovery. I think it's fair to say that we can all agree, whatever side of the fence you're on, whether you're a pro-burger, an anti-burger, or down the middler, that the prosecution have not been as forthcoming as they really should in terms of discovery around this case. At the end of the day, it's quite simple. The prosecution either believe that they have the right guy or they don't. And if they believe that they have the right guy and they're absolutely sure of it, then they must have evidence to prove it, to show it. And if they've got it, then they should hand it over to the defense. That's just the fundamentals of how the system should work. We believe your client did it. This is the evidence that we have, what supports us saying that. There you go, and we'll see you in court. That's it. That's it. But we haven't seen that. We have seen it's almost like become a game, a joke even, in terms of how many requests for discovery can there be, and why is Ann Taylor at certain times of this period has she had to consistently ask for the same thing over and over and over again. I think that can be explained later on in these notes, so just pay close attention. Thompson has demanded BK's alibi and any witnesses by name in his alibi as requested on more than one occasion. Now, what we're saying is the prosecution are real ramming hard about the alibi situation. Now, some people have pointed out in comments that this is just the way it is. This is just standard procedure, that there are rules around the alibi and they are in their right to ask for an alibi. It's not so much that they've asked about it, it's how they ask about it. It's how they ask about it, how many times they've gone on about it, how they've tried to block it, even in terms of Ann Taylor saying, we can give you an alibi when we've got specific information because you hold some information that is pertinent to us providing you with what you are requesting. This is where it brings us into the realms of the time advance reports and the cell phone data and the location information that the prosecution wish to use and utilize in their side of the story. Because what I believe Ann Taylor alongside Sahara is trying to do is to pull that apart, to say, look, what you've initially said in the PCA that you've now deemed irrelevant for some unbeknownst reason, well, we say unbeknownst, but it's becoming even more clear that there is an issue with location here and time. And they've put themselves in a little bit of a tight box because they've said that the crime happened at this time and they've tied the white Hyundai Lancer into it, and they've utilised the Bethany Funke and Dylan Mortensen as kind of the anchor for the time frame of the murders themselves. And Ann Taylor has always said, right from way back when, my client wasn't at this area at the time of the crime. So they've tied themselves into a time, and that's it. So if there is evidence somewhere that puts Bryan Kohberger somewhere else at the time of the crime, then that is problematic. But that's by and by. The point being, they've requested this alibi thing. Is it just normality? Is it normality? I'm sure it's normality to say that if you've got an alibi, give us the alibi, and you've got this, that, and the other. What isn't normality is to do things to try and block your ability to provide an alibi. Because what you've got to think here, this isn't a simplistic situation here. It isn't one where someone's with somebody and that person can turn around and say, well, I was with them. And in reality, if you step back a second and you think about this crime as a whole, who around this case rarely has an alibi that would satisfy the laws in Idaho around an alibi? Because the way I look at it, and we've spoken on this before, is if you remove the ability to say, I have an alibi because somebody else who technically should have an alibi is my alibi, then who has an alibi? I know that sounds strange, but, who's Jack DeCoeur's alibi? What, someone else who you could argue themselves would need an alibi? So is Jack DeCoeur then their alibi? So you're cancelling out each other by saying, well, we both should have an alibi outside of us being able to alibi each other. That's like Dylan Mortensen giving Bethany Funke an alibi and vice versa, when in reality, would they both not need an alibi? Rarely. Again, we look down the question of, if Bryan Kohberger didn't do it, then someone did do it. Who did do it? And if it's proven that he didn't, then how many of the alibis that people have got around this case are actually going to turn out to be nothing more than the cancellation of problematic people cancelling each other out? Let me know down below what you think about that, if you're still following me, of course. And on that note, subscribe to the channel, smash like, please. It's free. It's free, and we're heading towards the echelons of 100,000 subscribers. 100,000 subscribers. That's a lot. That is a lot. That's a big garden party, that is. Massive garden party, like Glastonbury. So, Thompson now appears to want a court order barring any witness with any knowledge of Kohberger or his alibi to be prohibited as evidence. So I'm just going to back up to here. Well, I'm going to come back to this section in a second, which it says about his known location. But this is, again, furthering on from the alibi problem. It does look like what they're trying to do is, again, as aforementioned, they're trying to not only say you need to give us your alibi, but they're trying to block the ability to give an alibi. Like, if Sahara can provide evidence that Bryan Kohberger wasn't at the scene of the crime at the time of the crime, then that's an alibi. By definition, that's an alibi, especially when they've tied the crime into this specific time. And that's likely what has happened here. Now, people can't get their head around it, and it says here, Kohberger's known location was established in the PCA by investigators between 3 and 5 a.m., which, if you've read the PCA, again, that they now deem irrelevant. Why do they now deem it irrelevant? Because they understand that there's errors in there. By errors, I mean there's things that's in there that shed a light on their shadiness. They couldn't determine or couldn't say that Bryan Kohberger was at this property between the hours of 3 and 5. Say they go down the route of trying to convince or provide an illusion that Bryan Kohberger's phone was off, and that's why they can't place him at the area of the crime, but yet they pulled 3,800 phones from a cell phone dump, and you can bet your bollocks to a barn dance that Bryan Kohberger is in that dump. He will be in that dump somewhere. Because if Bryan Kohberger's turned around and said to Ann Taylor, Sahara, I didn't turn my fucking phone off, mate. My phone's on. I had no reason to turn my phone off. I was just driving about. My phone was sitting in the front car. Whatever. My phone was on. So is that why they are adamant that there is data in there? Because Bryan Kohberger knows he didn't turn his phone off. They know that they pulled a dump, not as a, but pulled a cell phone dump, got all of this information, and they're sure that his details are in there. And if his details are in there, then it's going to show that he was somewhere else, isn't it? That's the thing here. But I know what people are going to say. Well, it weren't there. His phone was off. No, I don't believe his phone was off. And even the prosecution themselves or law enforcement themselves in the very first PCA couldn't absolutely state that his phone was switched off. Now, they have tried to allude to the fact that they can prove that his phone was switched off, but yet they won't, and they're trying to block someone who's likely to be able to prove otherwise. Again, blocking the alibi. So why would you want to block that if you're confident that you've got the person who did this crime? It just doesn't make sense, does it? And that's why you go down the route of this isn't then normality. One question: does this include Funke's proportion of material exculpatory evidence for the charges against the defendant? Remember, it goes to Funke, the private investigator goes to Funke, and she has information that is exculpatory to the client. This is where this entire fucking sting started to fall apart. The entire thing started falling apart. We see the grand jury indictment, which even the grand jury indictment, they haven't seen enough, because we know at that stage there just wasn't enough. Even now, some people could argue that there just doesn't seem to be enough to hold Bryan Kohberger where they're holding him. And people will turn around and say, yeah, but they've got DNA on the sheath. Yeah, you say that. You say that there's DNA on the sheath, but we have no evidence of the work done to conclude that. But we have got this sheath going through various outlets and conduits to a result that don't provide one. And then we have the FBI coming in. They were the final people to touch that scenario. Yet it wasn't even them that concluded or absolutely stated that the DNA on the sheath was Bryan Kohberger's DNA. There is no chain of custody whatsoever, or seemingly any documentation that provides evidentiary proof that that process went from A to B to result, and there you have it. That's it. That's the issue here. So where you can turn around and say, well, there is evidence. There's DNA on the sheath. I saw it yesterday. Someone said, yeah, but there's DNA found on a sheath, found under a victim, and that's it. This is done deal. Are you fucking insane? How can you turn around and say that because the prosecution, whose fucking whole sole purpose is to nail him for this crime, because they tell you that the DNA that was found on that sheath, if there was any fucking DNA on it, but the DNA found on that sheath was in fact Bryan Kohberger's. You're saying we have to believe that. We have to believe it without any evidence of it, without any proof of it. But then simultaneously, you want to turn around and say, well, but the other DNA found at the scene, the blood DNA found at the scene, the DNA found on underneath the fingernails of one of the victims, who was excluded as being Bryan Kohberger, that's then got to be ignored. You want to ignore that. It's insane to me. That is insane to me, that you, especially if you're in the US and you are affected by these constitutional issues, that you are willing to accept law enforcement, again, whose sole job is to convict someone of a crime. You want to take what they say at face value with no evidence, while simultaneously ignoring blatant evidence that something else happened here. Make that make sense. I can't work it out. But Bethany Funke, known only by her, unique to her, no other witness has knowledge of, things she saw, things she heard, no other witness has evidence Funke has. And bearing in mind that she was completely removed, not even removed, just weren't included in the first place. She is no part of the PCA whatsoever. No part of it. And we see these text messages between the two, but they don't offer a location. We don't know where these people were. Again, we just have to take someone's word for it that they are where they say they are, and the defense will perhaps argue that later on. Who knows? Do we have location data for them? Is it going to show exactly where they were in the house, whatever, at any time? Can it? Do you know what I mean? But we're saying We don't know what she saw. We don't know what she heard. But if it's exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger and they're blocking it, then what is it that she possibly knows? What is it? What can she know? Does she know that a specific car that arrived at a specific time was in fact a DoorDash? Does she know exactly what time that was? I heard, I looked at my clock. I know what time it was. I saw the car. It was a white fucking car. Do you know what I mean? Did she see something? It says here, the connection between Funke and Kohberger is obvious that it includes personal knowledge and portions of evidence to the charges against the defendant, which means that she knows something that will put a spanner in the works. And that's why she's not included in the PCA, why she's purposefully been removed from it, because she likely knows something, saw something, heard something that throws, again, without being repetitive, even though this is repetitive, a spanner in the works. We do not know where Miss Funke was between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m, nor in the early morning hours on November 13th. We do know she has knowledge and evidence of the charges, leading us to understand Funke has either personal knowledge, in-person knowledge, phone, car, material evidence, seen at locations at portions of time. Thompson and the state has Kohberger's alibi primarily provided by Miss Funke, the remainder in extraction data. Funke and Kohberger's phones and any contact providing material evidence against the charges proves she has personal knowledge of the time of the attack, knowing it is provable by the evidence she has. We now understand why Thompson wants to block Funke providing portions of Kohberger's alibi. And there we have it. Do you know what I mean? It is... What more can you say in this? Again, I understand. If you're someone who's a guilty, you trust in the system, you believe what you believe. You've been conditioned to believe that this is a done deal. I find it amazing that people still turn around and say, we've got stuff to weigh, there's going to be loads more, you've only seen a proportion of it. I don't believe that. I don't believe that there's loads more. Because what we have seen... They haven't even concluded that. There's still questions around every single other point they've raised. Now, it's all right that Fox News can bring on some FBI agent and say that the defense team are trying to create an illusion of weakness in the case. And that's primarily their job. They don't look at it as guilt versus innocence. They just look at what's incoming and they try and create an illusion that despite... the jury being told this story by the prosecution, the defense's job is to poke holes in it, which we get that. But in reality, if the prosecution is saying that they have DNA found at the crime scene on a knife sheath underneath one of the victims, then the chain of custody for that needs to be absolutely fucking solid. It needs to be absolutely solid, and it ain't. It doesn't appear to be. To say it's problematic, to say it's inconclusive, to say it's partial and ambiguous would be putting it mildly. And again, the car situation, we've got Bryan Kohberger's car at the scene. In what fucking picture does that absolutely, undeniably prove that this car is Bryan Kohberger's? It proves it's a white car. One of the cars is white. But there's nothing that you would be able to look at it and say that is 100% Bryan Kohberger's car. Not even an FBI agent could say that. But some people are just willing to convict now. They are so sure now. But Bethany Funke has been an issue, a thorn in the side of the prosecution from right at the start. And the question still remains, what does she know? Let me know down below what you think. I'll catch you all in video 2 later on today. Mwah.